Hey everybody, welcome back to Philly Film Brothers. I am Chris Pierdomenico here with my brother Dave Pierdomenico, and today we are talking about Creed 3, the third installment in the Creed trilogy, and I believe the overall ninth installment in the Rocky Creed verse.
So
right?
it should be called Rocky 9/Creed 3 or Rocky Balboa 4.
Yes, I guess that would be right. So this movie, kind of going into it, I mean, I knew it was going to be good. But I actually was surprised. It was much better than I thought it was going to be, because I think they went places, with the characters that I was interested in. Like, I was interested in Donnie being a father, and I was interested in Donnie being sort of like a manager, a producer of like boxing events. It was different than the first two, and I felt like this felt the most different of the Creed movies, and maybe of the Rocky movies too, while still staying true to the tropes of those movies.
Yeah, I'll say the fatherhood part, I really related to on a personal level. And as far as seeing him like manage Creed Athletics, I just got to say he managed his finances much better than Rocky did by not giving power of attorney to his idiot brother-in-law, who then lost it all.
Well, bear in mind that could happen in Creed 5.
It could, yeah. The jury's still out.
Yeah.
But for now, he's managing his portfolio much better.
Well, and Rocky 3 does have some parallels with Creed 3, in that Rocky 3 was showing him having a lot of success, and I feel like Rocky retired like every other movie from boxing, but I know it started with him. He was going on like TV shows, he was doing promotions and everything, and I felt like I did like that it was sort of parallel a bit to Creed 3, where we're saying, hey, here's what it looks like when Donnie is successful and how he does it. It's a bit different than how
it was his Eye of the Tiger, but I like that they also made it was him still coming to terms with his own past.
Yeah, and in that sense, I thought that this was the best villain of the three Creed movies. And obviously, like Creed 2, you have Ivan Drago's son. I mean, that's very, very iconic, of course, but you're depending on the lore of the Rocky mythology, whereas this was the first movie where I felt like it was not dependent on it. I mean, there were still Rocky elements in it. Like, obviously they reference Rocky. I like how they tied that in, like, oh well, Apollo Creed gave Rocky a shot, like, why shouldn't you do the same thing as your dad? That made sense to me to kind of wrap that in there. But I felt like the writing and the characters of this movie were not dependent on the Rocky series.
Well, don't tell Sylvester Stallone that, because he's already mad they made the movie without him.
Well, here's the thing, and I love Stallone. Stallone has done amazing things for people in Philly that work in film. He's a hero to all of us. Creed 2 ended his story perftly.
It gave him the happy ending that he always deserved, that the character always deserved.
Yeah, it would have been. I know we talked about this on the way out. Like, I think you could have gotten away with like maybe a quick cameo of him either at. By the way, this is going to be spoilers if you haven't seen it, but at Mrs. Creed's funeral, or maybe like he's watching the fight on TV, or Donnie gives him like a quick phone call. But it didn't make sense for him to be like even a supporting character in this, anything more than a cameo. And I think that even having him out of this was better, because it let the characters kind of stand on their own and be out of that shadow for the first time.
I mean, they could have done a plot twist that Damien was Clubber Lang's son, and then he shows up at the restaurant and he goes, I pity the fool that doesn't have my picture up on this restaurant. I'm just saying.
He probably had pictures of Clubber Lang. I think
it was only the Drago fight he didn't have, because he didn't want to celebrate that.
Right. And I know they had talked about, when Creed 2 came out, is the next one going to be Clubber Lang's son? And I was like, I hope they don't do that, because that's going to be stupid. That's going to be contrived. And
yeah. Damien feels like a spiritual successor to Clubber Lang in that he's the up and coming challenger, but with the added twist that, you know, obviously he has that connection to Adonis. And I like that as far as villains go, you know, obviously we learn in the movie how manipulative he is, even from the beginning, you know, that he's willing to do unethical things to get ahead.
Yeah.
But I love that all along, you know, Adonis really has to come to terms with the fact that, you know, he did screw this guy over. Like, he did. He has to wrestle with his own responsibility of, like, you know, he doesn't owe him the heavyweight championship, but he is kind of responsible for what happened.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love about this movie is, and I think this continues the trend of really all the Rocky and Creed films, is that your characters are complex and interesting. And I could not care less about boxing, like real life boxing. It's just not something I'm interested in.
We were just saying that in the movie, that like all the commentators are real life like sportscasters, and in the credits, it's like this person played themselves. And you and I were like, I have no idea who any of those people are.
No idea who they are. That's cool that they do it. Like, I love that the movies have always been authentic. Like, hey, this is something that's actually happening in the sports world and has had other real athletes, you know, in the movies. But I think it really continued the trend of having really complex, interesting characters where it's not so black and white, like who's right and who's wrong. It's much more complicated than that. And I feel like that's been true of all of the Rocky and Creed characters so far. And I think it's the same for this one. I think this one did the characters the best. Like, obviously the first Creed movie is a classic.
I like that they brought back Conlon from that one as just a nice little follow-up, that he faces him again.
Right. They bring back Conlon, and I was surprised they bring back Drago, which I thought was just a really cool footnote.
Well,
like, hey, you know what?
Victor Drago.
Victor Drago. You know, I don't know that he's going to be buddies with Ivan Drago, which I would understand.
But there's a mutually you know, that's Creed growing up and being that manager, that he realizes, hey, there's a lot to that name Drago. You know, this is good for him, it's good for us. You know, he's trying to build his brand, and I don't think he bears any grudge towards Victor Drago.
Right.
And I don't even think he does towards Ivan, because I think Creed 2 did a great job of really humanizing him.
Yeah.
And showing that he was a puppet back in Rocky 4, and that life wasn't kind to him after that loss.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why, like, Creed 2, I think, is the perfect ending for Rocky's arc, because that was like the last thing that he kind of had to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that being said, if we're talking villains, we have to address my favorite variant of Kang the Conqueror, Damian Anderson.
Yeah, it's funny when I love that the movie opened with like a long flashback, because you really get to see, like, oh my gosh, these guys were kids when this all happened. And I think the actors they picked, like, you really feel like it's them.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a Killmonger and Kang origin story.
And Killmonger's married to Valkyrie.
That I know. I wasn't even thinking of that. Yeah,
that too. You know, but you know, he's a great character, and I particularly loved in there. I had mixed feelings about this at the final fight. I know this was Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut.
Yeah,
he went a little surreal with the final fight, a little art house, in a way that this franchise has never done before. And I have mixed feelings, like when they go to the spiritual plane from Wakanda and they're fighting.
Yeah.
I know Michael B. Jordan was just hanging out there in Wakanda forever. Spoilers for that movie too.
Bring it in. I would love to see Killmonger face off against Kang, like, actually in the spiritual realm in the MCU. Like, that would just be really cool, especially because I loved Michael B. Jordan's appearance in Black Panther 2. I thought that was just a really cool way to use him again.
I think Killmonger would win.
I don't know. They're both some of the best villains Marvel's ever had.
Kang is more powerful. Killmonger's more determined. He will do anything.
I don't know. I think, well, so we just met Kang, so I think that there's more to him. I think he has
This is the part of the review where we stop talking about Creed 3 and just go on a tangent about the MCU.
I think Kang has better tech. He's from the future. He's got better technology, so I think he has more resources to win.
It didn't save him when he was fighting Creed. Now did it?
No, but I know what you mean. Like when it became kind of surreal and
with like the prison bars coming up, I got what he was doing, but a small part of me was like, yes, this franchise has had the weird robot that Paulie was in love with, but it's never gone this unrealistic, so to speak. It's never gone like visually surreal.
I get it, and I know it's like it caught me off guard. I'm like, okay, we're doing this, all right. But at the same time, I thought it was kind of refreshing that they were doing this, and I like the fact that like not so much the prison bars. I wasn't like, I didn't think that like, oh, that really made the scene. But when they're fighting and it's like everybody else is gone and it's just the two of them, I thought that was particularly poignant and showing just how personal, this fight was. I really like that because you figure in their minds, like they're not thinking about anything else going on. They're just thinking about each other.
Well, yeah, it's this big climactic boxing match, but at its core, it's just it's a heartbreaking thing that they were two best friends. They were like brothers, and harsh circumstances drove them to what happened. Harsh circumstances drove them apart, and that ultimately Adonis has to kind of admit that, like, no, you're right, life has not been fair, and that could just as easily have been him who went away for 18 years.
Right. And, just the whole idea of someone watching someone else achieve their dreams. I mean, it's just really, really interesting on so many levels. And I think so, relatable. So I would say, I mean, it's been a while since I watched the first Creed film, but I probably would say this is the best one so far. As someone saying that I love the first two, but I think that this was even better. There's no Rocky. That's a huge part of what makes the first Creed.
There's no Philly in it too, which feels weird.
There's no Philly in it, and I thought about that, but it kind of makes sense. I mean, this was supposed to be a passing of the baton from Rocky to Creed, and it makes sense that it would take place in L.A. Like, I'm actually kind of glad.
Of course, that's where Adonis would have moved back to. That's where his mom lived.
Right.
That was home to him.
Yeah.
That's where Apollo was from.
I will say, and there's still, I mean, you still see, there's still influences of Rocky, in the movie. You see Apollo on the background of the gym. You see Duke. Did you see Duke?
Yes.
With Apollo, in that what do you call it?
A decal.
Decal. Yeah, you see it in the decal. And it just made sense to me, and they could have done that, but I like the idea of the baton being given to Adonis, and now it's Adonis's franchise, and it's still in the Rocky universe. Like, I love that it still acknowledges these things happened all those years ago, and obviously Adonis isn't who he is without Rocky, but I feel like the absence of Rocky allowed the rest of these characters and actors to shine in a really good way.
No, even in the Rocky franchise, Mickey's a huge part of, he's Rocky's mentor, but even he dies in Rocky 3, and then Rocky kind of has to become that mentor himself. At least they tried it in 5 and it failed miserably, but we don't speak of that movie. And then it was perfected again, I think, in Creed, where he is now Rocky's the Mickey, and at a certain point, Rocky had to go on without Mickey, so Creed's got to go on without Rocky. Fortunately, right. Rocky didn't have to die for it, though.
And I'm glad. Like, I wouldn't want them to repeat that. I like to know that Rocky's happy with his son and his grandson, and everything.
Somewhere they're in Montreal watching the match,
right?
And Rocky's telling his grandson, "Oh, do you know what it's about? How hard you can hit?" And Robert is like, "Dad, are you doing that speech again?"
Like, thanks a lot. That was like the worst moment of my life.
You do that speech every other week.
I will say, I still like Rocky 5. Like, obviously, it's not the best one, but I think there's a charm to it, and it kind of shows. I think even as a mentor,
I
when you
think
first
Creed
start,
was a better version of Rocky Five, and
I
they did
agree,
that storyline much better.
but I think it kind of shows when you're not. It's kind of like being a teacher. It's like when you're a young teacher, you're going to make pretty big mistakes. And then if you do it long enough and you're older, you're wiser, and then you kind of do it better. And I think that's kind of how I saw it.
So
It is obviously we do.
which of your students from your first year of teaching challenged you to a street fight?
It hasn't happened
When did
yet.
that happen? Hasn't happened yet.
It's not happened yet, no. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of all I have to say on the movie. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would. And I think primarily because they focused on the characters and they tried different things. Like it did not feel like a rehash of the previous two.
You could tell. I think in the Rocky series as they went on, especially, I think Rocky 4 feels the most like a corporate product and like Cold War propaganda, and
Right.
it would have been very easy for these movies to go down that same route, to go down the same route of like feeling like corporate products. But I think because you had Michael B. Jordan directing, it was like a passion project for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope he directs more films, even with him, even if he's not starring in the film. I think that would be. I mean, I was really impressed. I mean, I didn't know.
Let's see him direct a Marvel movie.
Yeah, this is his first movie he directed, right? I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So really impressed. So we look forward to seeing what comes from him. So, folks, thanks for watching Philly Film Brothers. We appreciate you joining us. Be sure to subscribe. Also, check out Halloween Year Round on.
If you love horror.
If you love horror, check out Dave's site on YouTube and on just Google it. Find on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.